On June 1st, 2017, an explosive investigation was made public, and with it, South Africa was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. At the heart of it all, three brothers, foreign businessmen. They went by the name the Guptas. These brothers held no political office, no official mandate, yet they wielded more power than most presidents could ever dream of. For over 2 decades, the Guptas operated from the shadows, pulling strings, signing off on deals, handpicking ministers, and the country dry, all while smiling for the cameras. They redirected billions meant for public good into their own pockets. And somehow, they did all of this while flying under the radar. What this investigation revealed wasn't just corruption. It was state capture on a scale South Africa had never seen before. This is the story of how three brothers captured a nation and how South Africa is still fighting to take it back. In the early 1990s, South Africa was going through a huge change. After many years of apartheid, a system that kept people apart based on race and took away the rights of the majority, the country was finally moving toward freedom. Nelson Mandela, who had become a global symbol of hope, had been released from prison in 1990. Talks to end apartheid had started, and by 1993, the country was getting ready for its first election, where everyone, no matter their race, could vote. The world was watching closely. It was a time filled with hope, excitement, and uncertainty, as South Africa prepared to leave its painful past behind and start fresh. The country was not just changing politically, it was also opening up to the rest of the world after years of being cut off, welcoming new ideas, investment, and people ready to help build a new future. In the middle of all this change, three brothers from Saharanpur, a town in Uttar Pradesh, India, arrived in South Africa in 1993. Atul, Ajay, and Rajesh Gupta, also known as Tony. At the time, they weren't well known outside of India. Atul was the first to make the move. Like many immigrants looking for better opportunities, the Guptas probably saw South Africa as a land full of promise, a place where hard work and ambition could lead to success. Many others felt the same way, drawn by the hope of the Rainbow Nation. But the Guptas' story would become one of the most talked about tales in South Africa's modern history. In the beginning, though, they arrived quietly, just another family looking to build a life in a new country that was itself just beginning a new chapter. After they arrived, South Africa held its first democratic election in 1994. Nelson Mandela became the country's first black president, and the mood was full of celebration and pride. Around the same time, the Gupta family started their main business, Sahara Computers. Their timing couldn't have been better. The world was stepping into a new era of computers and technology, and South Africa, eager to modernize, needed computers and tech products. Sahara Computers began as a small business, focused on putting together and selling personal computers and parts. Their plan was simple: offer affordable technology to a market that needed it. The Guptas worked hard to build their brand, and over time, Sahara became a known name in South Africa's growing tech scene. Their prices were good, and their reach kept growing. For many South Africans, their first experience with a computer may have been through Sahara. As the company grew, so did the Guptas' presence in the business world. They were seen as hardworking entrepreneurs, part of the new group of business people helping South Africa move forward. In those early days, everything seemed above board. Sahara Computers looked like a true success story, proof of what could happen when ambition met opportunity in a country ready to grow. No one could have guessed back then how controversial their name would later become. By the mid to late 1990s, Sahara Computers was doing well, and that success gave the Gupta family more than just money. It gave them a strong starting point to grow their business in other areas. It soon became clear that they weren't just interested in technology, they had bigger plans. South Africa was still finding its economic direction after apartheid, and there were lots of opportunities for people who had money and good business sense. The Guptas seemed to have both. So, using the success of Sahara as a base, they slowly started expanding into other industries. This wasn't some wild rush into everything at once. It was a step-by-step process. One of the first big areas they moved into was mining. South Africa has always been rich in natural resources like gold, diamonds, coal, and platinum. For anyone wanting to build a powerful business, getting into mining made perfect sense. The Guptas likely saw that owning or investing in mining could bring huge profits and a lot of influence. At the same time, they also began looking at the media industry. While this part of their empire would become much more important later on, the early interest began during the late 1990s and early 2000s. The the Guptas were trying to build a diverse business empire with a presence in different parts of the economy. Each new business helped them grow their network. They met more people, made more connections, and learned more about how business worked in South Africa. To the outside world, it looked like a family committed to helping South Africa grow, investing money, creating jobs, and becoming part of the country's future. But the Guptas seemed to realize something early on. In a country like South Africa, where the government plays a big role in the economy, making money through business alone might not be enough. If they wanted real power and long-term success, they also needed to build relationships with the people in charge. That meant getting close to politicians. The African National Congress, ANC, the party of Nelson Mandela and the fight against apartheid, was clearly the most powerful political group, and it looked like they would stay in power for a long time. So, for a family like the Guptas, getting to know important people in the ANC made a lot of sense. Back then, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, this didn't seem strange. Many businesses try to build relationships with politicians. For the Guptas, it was just smart business. They were making sure people in power knew who they were. They were laying the groundwork for the future, creating trust and building a name for themselves among South Africa's decision makers. It looked like normal behavior from a family trying to grow their business in a new country, eager to support the system that welcomed them. Very few people could have guessed how deep those early connections would go, or how much power the Guptas would later hold within the South African government. As the 2000s began and South Africa continued building its democracy, the Gupta family started refining how they dealt with people in power. They had already made a name for themselves with Sahara Computers and had begun expanding into other industries. But now, they were focusing their attention more clearly, especially on one rising political figure, Jacob Zuma. In the early 2000s, Zuma's political career was on the rise. He had been deputy president of the ANC since 1997 and became South Africa's deputy president in 1999. Even after he was removed from that role in 2005 due to a scandal, he remained popular with many ANC members. That support helped him get elected as ANC president in 2007. During this time, the Guptas worked hard to build a closer relationship with him. This wasn't just about showing up to the same events anymore, they were forming a more personal connection. According to reports and later testimonies, the Guptas offered Zuma support and friendship. One clear sign of how close they were becoming was how many Zuma family members began working with Gupta-owned companies. Zuma's son, Duduzane Zuma, became a director and shareholder in several Gupta businesses. One of Zuma's wives, Bongi Njema Zuma, also reportedly got a job in a Gupta company. Some saw these jobs as helpful opportunities for Zuma's family. Others believed it brought the two families too close together, creating shared interests and possibly even debts between them. Still, it was clear the Guptas were building a strong link with a man many believed would become South Africa's next president, and that connection would prove very useful for them. The year 2009 was a major turning point in South Africa's democracy, and an even bigger moment for the Gupta family. In May of that year, Jacob Zuma, the man the Guptas had spent years building a close relationship with, became the president of South Africa. For many of his supporters, this was a time of hope and big changes promised for the economy. But for the Gupta family, it was the beginning of a period where they allegedly gained huge access and influence. The connections they had carefully built were now about to pay off in a big way. Between 2009 and around 2016 or 2017, the Guptas' power reportedly reached its peak. This period became known to many South Africans as the era of state capture. What once seemed like quiet networking quickly turned into something much bigger, where the Guptas were allegedly able to influence some of the most important decisions in government and state-owned companies. The main focus of this influence was South Africa's state-owned enterprises, also known as SOEs. These are massive government-run companies that control key parts of the country's economy, like electricity through Eskom, rail and ports through Transnet, and manufacturing through Denel. These companies handle billions of rands and are in charge of large-scale national projects, so having control over them meant having control over huge amounts of money and power. The Guptas allegedly had a plan to place friendly people into top positions within these companies and the government departments that oversaw them. This included cabinet ministers, CEOs, CFOs, and board members. With the right people in place, The Guptas could reportedly steer contracts, influence decisions, and benefit from the state's resources. Eskom, South Africa's main electricity supplier, became one of the best-known examples of this alleged strategy. Eskom signed major coal contracts with Tegeta Exploration and Resources, a company linked to the Guptas and Zuma's son Duduzane. These contracts raised red flags. Eskom was accused of paying way too much for poor quality coal, sometimes even paying up front for coal that hadn't been delivered yet. One of the most controversial deals involved Tegeta buying the Optimum coal mine. To help make this happen, Eskom reportedly fined the mine's previous owners and then made sure Tegeta would be able to sell coal to Eskom once the deal was done. Two top Eskom executives at the time, CEO Brian Molefe and CFO Anosh Singh, were later accused of helping make this deal work for the Guptas, and both came under heavy criticism for their close ties to the family. Even South African Airways, SAA, the national airline, wasn't spared. Reports showed that some procurement and business decisions at SAA were also being influenced by people connected to the Guptas. Again, the pattern was the same: key people in key places and big contracts going to Gupta-linked businesses. Across all these state institutions, the story seemed to repeat itself. Friendly individuals were placed in top positions. Procurement processes were manipulated. Massive contracts went to companies linked to the Gupta network. And while all of this was happening, the companies themselves were struggling, losing money, falling into mismanagement, and weakening in their ability to serve the public. As the Gupta family's power allegedly grew under President Jacob Zuma's leadership, it became clearer how they were benefiting from their connections. According to several investigations, their actions also became bolder. It wasn't just about having friends in government anymore. It was about allegedly using their connections to control state resources for their own profit. One of the most common ways they were accused of doing this was through something South Africans started calling tenderpreneurship. This basically means rigging government contracts, also known as tenders, to make sure the winning companies were either owned by the Guptas or by people close to them. Instead of choosing the best or most affordable company for the job, insiders were allegedly used to influence who got the deal. Sometimes, this meant getting early access to tender documents, or writing the requirements in a way that only Gupta-linked businesses could meet. Other times, it meant influencing the people making the final decision. The end result? Billions of rands in government money reportedly went to these companies, often at inflated prices or for work that wasn't properly done. Another common method involved consultancy fees. Companies like Trillion Capital Partners and Regiments Capital, both tied to Gupta associate Salem Essa, were said to be heavily involved in this. These companies were allegedly inserted into big deals with state-owned enterprises, SOEs, like Eskom and Transnet. They would then charge massive amounts of money for giving advice or consulting services. But a lot of this work was either unnecessary, could have been done by the SOE's own staff, or didn't actually happen at all. Many believe these fees were used as a way to move money around, possibly to hide it or send it back to the Guptas and their network. But maybe the most shocking claims were about the Guptas allegedly trying to decide who should be in government. One of the most famous examples came from former Deputy Finance Minister Mcebisi Jonas. In 2016, Jonas said that in 2015, he was called to the Gupta family's home in Saxonwold, Johannesburg. There, he claimed, one of the Gupta brothers offered him the powerful role of finance minister, along with a massive bribe of 600 million rands. The deal was simple. If he accepted, he was expected to make decisions that would benefit the Gupta's businesses. Jonas refused. His testimony, and others like it, painted a disturbing picture: a private family allegedly trying to choose South Africa's leaders to protect their own business interests. As these things were happening and more people started asking questions, the Guptas also launched their own media platforms to control the story. In 2010, they started a newspaper called The New Age, TNA. Then, in 2013, they launched a TV news channel called AN 7. While these were introduced as new voices in the media world, many critics saw them as tools to protect the Guptas and President Zuma. These outlets were often accused of ignoring stories that made the Guptas look bad and attacking anyone who criticized them. But these media companies weren't just about shaping public opinion. They also made money from the state. The New Age became known for its business breakfasts, where government departments and SOEs paid large amounts to attend or sponsor. These events often featured Zuma or his ministers as speakers, which created a circle. State money supported a media outlet, and that outlet praised the people in power. and 7, even though it was often mocked for its poor quality, also received government advertising. This blurred the line between public money and private business in a way that made many South Africans uncomfortable. However, the event that truly shocked the country came in April 2013 in what became known as Guptagate. A jet full of Gupta wedding guests landed at Waterkloof Air Force Base, a highly secure military airport normally reserved for heads of state and military aircraft. The guests were flying in from India to attend a lavish wedding at Sun City, a luxury resort. The fact that a private family could use a national military base for a wedding caused a huge public outcry. It was seen as a massive abuse of power and proof that the Guptas had influence far beyond what any business family should have. The Waterkloof scandal made headlines for weeks. It raised serious questions about who approved the landing, how it was allowed to happen, and whether national security had been compromised. For many South Africans, this was the breaking point. It showed just how far the Gupta family's reach allegedly went, into the military, into government, and into the public purse. It made people wonder whether the Guptas believed they were untouchable, operating outside the law. Between 2015 and 2018, the Gupta family's grip on power in South Africa started to break. For years, it had looked like nothing could touch them. But then, brave people, sharp journalism, and a few key moves from state institutions began to shine a light on what was really going on. Slowly but surely, the truth started to come out, and it shocked the nation. Even as the Guptas and their close allies allegedly tightened their hold on parts of the government, South Africa's independent media was quietly working behind the scenes. Investigative reporters from places like Amabhungane, Daily Maverick's Scorpio, News 24, The Sunday Times, and the Mail and Guardian began digging deep. They followed the money, traced strange company links, and exposed shady deals. It wasn't easy. Many stories involved complicated financial setups, official denials, and sometimes even threats. But the journalists pushed forward. Their stories began to show how government money and decisions were being twisted to benefit a few powerful people. Their work was made even stronger by whistleblowers, people from inside government departments, state-owned companies, and businesses tied to the Guptas. Some had seen what was happening up close and decided they couldn't stay silent. They started sharing documents, emails, and personal stories, often putting their jobs and safety at risk. Their courage gave journalists hard evidence and gave the public a clear view of how deep the alleged corruption really went. People like Mcebisi Jonas, the former deputy finance minister, had already made headlines by claiming he was offered a ministerial job and 600 million rand by the Guptas. He was one of many who helped expose just how far the family's influence seemed to reach. Then, in October 2016, came a major turning point. South Africa's public protector at the time, Thuli Madonsela, released a report called State of Capture. Her office had been looking into claims that the Guptas had an unfair level of control over President Zuma and government institutions. Despite facing pressure and attempts to block her work, Madonsela stayed firm. While she didn't have the tools to run a full investigation, her report still revealed a disturbing pattern. It showed that the Guptas were allegedly involved in picking ministers, influencing the boards of key state companies, and steering state contracts toward themselves and their partners. Madonsela's report didn't just present shocking details. It called for something bigger, a full judicial commission with real power to investigate everything properly. That suggestion turned up the heat. For the first time, a respected institution had officially said that these were not just rumors. There was something very wrong, and it needed to be taken seriously. But if State of Capture cracked the door open, what came next blew it wide open. In mid-2017, South Africa was rocked by the Gupta leaks. This was a massive leak of hundreds of thousands of emails and documents taken from companies linked to the Guptas. Journalists got hold of the files and spent weeks going through them. What they found was explosive. The leaks revealed in real time how the Guptas allegedly operated. The emails included things like government job applications being sent directly to Gupta emails, travel bookings for officials paid for by Gupta businesses, and ministers getting help with their speeches and letters, sometimes written for them by people in the Gupta network. There were also records of big money transfers that raised serious questions about money laundering and shady deals. What made the Gupta leaks different was that it wasn't just someone's word against another's. These were real documents, real emails, and real receipts. It became almost impossible for anyone involved to deny what was going on. The leaks backed up what whistleblowers and journalists had been saying for years and revealed even more that no one had known. The fallout was massive. Public anger exploded, and pressure on the government to act grew stronger by the day. The leaks also gave investigators a clear map to follow. When the Zondo Commission was launched later, many of its leads came directly from the Gupta leaks. In the end, this flood of truth began to pull apart the carefully built structure that had allowed the Guptas to gain so much power. What once seemed like an untouchable empire was now exposed and slowly collapsing. People across the country weren't going to sit quietly anymore. Protests broke out in big cities like Johannesburg, Pretoria, Cape Town, and Durban. Citizens of all backgrounds marched with signs calling for justice. The Zuma Must Fall movement took off, targeting President Jacob Zuma, who was accused of allowing all of this to happen under his watch. All this pressure started shaking things up inside the ANC, the ruling party. For a long time, the ANC had been seen as the party of liberation and democracy, but now that reputation was being tested. Some ANC members continued to defend Zuma. Others, including respected leaders and former ministers, started to speak out. They warned that if the party didn't act, it would lose the trust of the people. Tensions grew, the unity of the ANC was cracking, and the state capture crisis became the center of political battles within the party. By early 2018, the situation had reached a boiling point. The ANC's top leadership, the National Executive Committee, NEC, finally stepped in. They recalled President Zuma, which meant they were officially asking him to step down. Zuma resisted at first, but with the threat of being removed by a vote in parliament, he gave in. On February 14, 2018, he resigned. It was the end of his 9-year presidency, and for many, it felt like a step toward justice. But while South Africa was starting to deal with the aftermath, the Gupta brothers were already slipping away. Around 2016, as the pressure grew, they began quietly leaving the country. By the time Zuma resigned in 2018, the main Gupta brothers, Atul, Ajay, and Rajesh, had already relocated to Dubai. For many South Africans, their exit felt like a way to escape justice. It also set up the next big fight, trying to get them back to South Africa to face the consequences of what they were accused of doing. In January 2018, just weeks before Zuma resigned, a major step was taken. The Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption, and fraud in the public sector was officially set up. Most people would come to know it simply as the Zondo Commission, named after Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who was appointed to lead it. Justice Zondo was widely respected, and his leadership gave the commission a sense of seriousness and trust right from the beginning. The commission's job was huge. It wasn't just about looking into the Gupta family's involvement, as exposed in the Public Protector's report. It also had to investigate wider corruption across the government and state-owned companies. The commission's main goal was to find the truth, name those involved in wrongdoing, and suggest ways to fix the system and prevent something like this from happening again. The public hearings started in August 2018 and lasted until August 2021. For 3 years, South Africans watched or listened as the country's dirty secrets were aired out, often live on TV and online. These hearings became part of everyday life. Hundreds of people gave testimony: former ministers, top government officials, executives from state-owned companies, auditors, whistleblowers, and more. Many were brave enough to speak openly about what they had seen or experienced. Some had risked their jobs or safety just to expose the truth. While many of those accused were questioned at the commission, the Gupta brothers didn't show up in person. They stayed overseas and sent written statements instead, but the commission still gathered a mountain of evidence: emails from the Gupta leaks, financial records, contracts, forensic audits, and signed affidavits. After all the testimony, documents, and investigations, the Zondo Commission started releasing its final report in parts beginning in January 2022. The full report was completed by June 2022 and ran thousands of pages long, a sign of just how big the problem really was. The commission's findings were clear. State capture wasn't just a few corrupt acts here and there. It was a planned and well-organized system that had spread through major parts of the government. At the heart of it all, according to the report, was the Gupta family, working closely with then-President Jacob Zuma and a network of officials and business people. After the Zondo Commission's findings, people were hoping that justice would follow quickly. But it hasn't been easy. The National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, has struggled to bring cases against top figures linked to state capture. And trying to bring the Gupta brothers to justice has also been very difficult. After they left South Africa, Interpol issued red notices for their arrest. There was hope in 2022 when Atul and Rajesh Gupta were arrested in Dubai. South Africa asked the UAE to send them back, but in early 2023, a UAE court rejected the request. The court said there were problems with the paperwork and legal process. This was a huge setback, causing tension between the two countries and deep disappointment in South Africa. South Africa is still healing from the deep wounds left by state capture. The journey to rebuild trust, fix broken systems, and hold the guilty accountable is far from over. But it is one the country must continue if it hopes for a better future.